Welcome to Let the Boys Kiss, the creation of queer ships, where we ask the question, is it queer baiting, queer coding, or queer canon?
This week, we'll be discussing Mac and Dennis from It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. I'm Maddie.
And I'm Kelsey.
It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, a 16-season-long show.
Took no time at all to get this content in. Easy peasy.
You cannot accuse us of lack of preparation for our episodes.
So, who are we talking about today?
We are talking about Ronald McDonald, otherwise known as Mac, and Dennis Reynolds from It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. They are best friends. They own a bar together. They are roommates.
Oh my God. They were roommates. Now, we have both seen all of the show, as we said. Did you start watching the show when it first started airing? Like, where did you come in?
I probably started watching the show when it was a few seasons in, because I think I would have been maybe in college. So that could have been as many as, God, how many years ago is that now?
How many years ago were we in college?
Yeah. Uh-huh. Something like that. I don't think I'd been watching it from the beginning, but I was watching it from, I don't know, season 4 or 5, something like that.
Because it started in 2005, right? That's when it premiered? Okay.
It's a show that I watched never religiously, sort of in fits and starts. So it would be like, oh yeah, It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, and I would binge 2 seasons, and then I would like not watch it for 3 years and then go back and watch it. So I have been watching it for a long time, but not always week to week.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas you,
first time, whole thing. Had to get through 16 whole seasons.
A nice 16 season binge.
Yep. And luckily I liked it. This would have been, I think if I hated it, we would have had to take a different approach.
We did make an agreement. At the beginning of the prep for this, I said, no matter what the show, this is a show that I love, but no matter what the show is, if we're planning to watch an entire series, if one of us hates it, we're not doing it because it's just not worth it.
We could have still potentially done it, but it would have been like, you give me specific episodes so I can track, what's happening. But no, I don't think I could have sat through. They're not super long seasons towards the end, but still it's like 150 episodes or something.
Yeah, it's the longest running sitcom in American television history now. So it's a lot of TV. Plus, sure. I do agree. We have done shows before where we just watched the episodes that pertain to the ship. I really don't think anybody who hates this show would enjoy watching any amount of episodes of it. It's a particular kind of taste.
Yes. Well, but we're here. And I did like the show, so I watched the whole thing, and I'm not mad about it at all.
Yes. So this is an interesting one because kind of is a bit of a unicorn in the sense that this is a show where fans were watching and thinking that one of the characters was queer. And at first, he was not canonically so. And then because of some fan interaction, the way that they wrote the show shifted a little bit. And so it's kind of an interesting case for us because that, despite the fact that for the past season or so, we've kind of just been doing anything queer related on television, this show started as a show about how fans and creators interact in terms of their queer characters. So it's a return to form for us.
Indeed. Yes. And it's sort of, not to get ahead of ourselves, but the thing that we are always talking about, which shows will like have straight relationships happen that just sort of develop as the chemistry on the show develops and as the character develops. But we very rarely see the other side of things happen where they're like, oh, these two characters have chemistry and we're writing it this way. So the logical progression is they're gay or whatever in a relationship.
Or whatever, yeah.
And that's so rare. And this is a case where the show developed in a certain way. And then the fans were like, this? And they were like, I guess you're right.
I think you're right.
So
yeah, I love it. Kind of
cool.
Yeah.
And probably not the place you would expect it.
It is a shocking place to find a well-developed queer storyline. I mean, not once you know the backstory, but on its face, if you don't know anything about this show, I think you would be surprised.
Yes. Or if you know a little bit about the show, maybe.
Right, exactly. If you know just like the very basic amount about the show, you're going to be like, excuse me? That doesn't make any sense. But here we are.
Indeed.
So we are going to do our usual format for this show. We're going to run through the moments of the show. We've split it into a couple of segments. We have a section that is about Mac, Ronald McDonald's sexuality, because there's a long running sort of coming out arc for him. And then we have a section that is about Mac and Dennis's relationship in particular, because that is the ship we are here to discuss. As it is a 16 season show, it might be a little bit lengthy. Strap in, kind of a supernatural length series of events. So
That's true. But it'll be good because our last episode was very short. So, we're due for a longer
that's true.
a longer episode.
That is true.
Okay. So, we're going to start with Mac's journey. And I will say that coming into the show, right, you had prepped me with this is what happened. But then I was very surprised very early in the show. This is season 1, episode 4, so hard to get much earlier in the run.
Yep.
That Max starts dating a trans woman. And I was like, okay, interesting. Tell me about Carmen.
Yes, and it's a bit of an arc, actually. Carmen is a trans woman who okay, wait. Actually, I feel like what we should do before we get into the things is say, if you don't know anything about this show, it is a show about horrible, terrible, worst people that you've ever seen. It's sort of like
absurdly
terrible people. It is like Seinfeld taken to the next level of horrible people.
Yes. And maybe we should set up. So there's Dee and Dennis, their brother and sister. And Dennis started a bar. They bought a bar and work at a bar with his very good friends, Mac and Charlie. And then in season 2, Dee and Dennis's estranged father, Frank, who is Danny DeVito, comes into the picture. And we quite quickly learn that he's not their real father. So then he's just the guy. Oh, he owns the bar and he's very wealthy.
Well, yeah, he's very rich, so they use him for their schemes. The 5 of them will be referred to as the gang, and the premise of most of the episodes of the show are that the gang get up to some sort of scheme, and that scheme is often financed by Frank, so that's why he's around. Frank also lives with Charlie. Dennis and Mac live together. These are the main dynamics of the show. But I did want to preface that because a lot of the events we're going to be describing will sound very horrible on their face.
Yes.
So I do want...
But know that the show knows these people are horrible and things never work out for them.
No. Anytime the gang comes up against a normal person in the show, the normal person is the victor of that scenario, and they will look horrible and always lose. So that is the gang. I particularly wanted to start with that because this trans woman storyline is fascinating, but they do not come off looking particularly well in it. So to begin with that. But anyway, he meets Carmen, who is a trans woman, but hasn't had bottom surgery, is an important part of the storyline. He doesn't know at first because she's just a hot woman that he's sitting on in a bar. And then he finds out this fact from Dennis and Dee, and he gets sort of repulsed because they're all repulsed by it, and he goes over to be like, I can't believe you lied to me, and she very quickly is able to manipulate him into forgetting about this fact, and they sort of date a little bit in the first episode, much as he's ashamed of it. This is season 1, episode 4. She goes away for a while, then in season 3, all of a sudden she's back, and they're secretly dating each other in a more, focused way, I guess, than they were in season 1. And then again, it comes to a head because she wants them to just date normally and go out and see people. And he's like, he doesn't mind being seen with her. He just doesn't want people to know they're sleeping together. And so then that, of course, doesn't work out either because she's very normal and lovely and isn't going to put up with this. And then 3 seasons later in season 6, I love how they bring this storyline back.
Yes.
There is an episode where Carmen, she's now post-surgery. She's gotten married to a man that is not Mac. And Mac runs into them and finds out about this and has a whole crisis about it because he is jealous that he always assumed once she got the surgery, he was going to get a call. Because then he would be fine with dating her, and he doesn't get the call, and then he finds out she's married someone else. He's very jealous about it and decides that this is a gay marriage and he can't support it. An important part of Mac's characterization is that he's extraordinarily Catholic. He considers it the main thing about his identity, that and being Irish. And so he's very anti-gay.
Yes.
That's the heart of where this joke, if you will, joke about him being gay for the early seasons comes in. So because he's jealous, he's like, this is a gay marriage and it will not stand. And all of his friends make fun of him because clearly he's just jealous that she's with someone else. And, he keeps having confrontations with her about it. And she's like, what is the problem? You
Yeah.
know, why? Let's get to the root of this. He's like trying to quote the Bible to her and her husband, and it doesn't go well
No.
because he's also very dumb. But
Yeah. No, and I think, right, there's an interesting evolution for the rest of the gang, which then reflects what we're saying about the way they treat Mac's character, where the issue is Mac's embarrassment.
mm-hmm.
And Carmen is also, again, one of these normal people that they come up against where she's like, what the hell is wrong with you guys? Like, let's just do
Yeah.
this or not do this. And
Yeah, she's like, are you jealous because this is about us? And he's like, nah, I would never admit that. But you're just like, oh, Mac.
just an interesting, very early queerness to the Mac character,
Yep,
I would say.
the Mac.
Okay, so that's going on up through season 6, and then we do see Carmen one more time, and that's when Dee has her baby, which is very fun. Also,
That's a fun episode. Dee is giving birth to a baby, and they have no idea who the father is, and they become convinced that it's one of them from a drunken night of revelry at their bar. And so they spend the episode trying to figure out who the father is, and then at the end, it's like, it has nothing to do with any of you. I was just messing with you, and I'm a surrogate for Carmen. And you're like, oh, that's lovely. It's actually a lovely scene at the end with Carmen and her husband.
It is. It's really nice. Okay, so, and a wonderful way to write in Caitlin Olsen's real-life pregnancy.
Yes.
So the next sort of thing that's going on throughout the show is as we move along, the gang is much more willing to just be like, Mac's gay, right? We all...
Yeah, I think we're all getting a vibe from Mac, that Mac's gay.
We all agree. So set up this episode, Mac Bangs the Waitress, season 4, episode 4.
So this is an episode where Mac is mad at Charlie because he's been making these Project Badass videos of him doing badass stunts. And he shows them to Charlie because he's so proud of them. And Charlie says that he really likes them and thinks they're cool. But then later he finds Charlie destroying a videotape. And he's like, I can't believe Charlie lied to me about liking my Project Badass tapes. I'm going to ruin his life. And he decides he's going to sleep with the waitress, who is someone that Charlie has been in love with and stalking for the entire length of the show. Who, by the way, is played by Charlie Day's real life wife, which is a delightful situation. So the waitress who hates Charlie is also just as messed up as the rest of the gang and like always willing to sleep with any of them for whatever reason, aside from Charlie. So she's down for this plan, but she has some things that she wants out of it. She needs to get into Dennis's apartment because the two of them have previously had sex and Dennis has a tape of it that she wants to retrieve. And then now that they've gotten into Dennis's apartment, she's like, okay, great. I'm fine to sleep with you, but first I want to get into Charlie's apartment for whatever reason she wants to do that. So Dennis and Charlie have been listening in on this because also running through the episode is this idea of Charlie thinks that Mac is his best friend and Dennis is trying to woo Charlie back to be his best friend and he's playing them against each other. So they're spying. They hear without any context this conversation between Mac and the waitress who are plotting to go into Charlie's apartment to bang. Would you like to be Mac or the waitress?
I could go either way. Do you have any preference?
I don't have any preference. I will be Mac, I guess. Okay, so they come in on the conversation. He says, if we're going to do this, the only way it's going to work is if you're dressed like a man.
You want me to get dressed like a man?
Yeah, the only way it's really going to work for me is if you're dressed like Dennis or Charlie.
I should probably dress like Charlie because he's kind of my height.
No, I'm going to be Charlie. You're going to be Dennis. That's going to be much better for me, trust me. We'll dress you up in his clothes, and that way we can slip you in and out with ease, because we got to be very careful. This could be a very, very messy situation. Okay, so I want you to stay behind me. Get behind me and stay behind me the whole time.
No, I think I want to be in front of you.
No, you got to be behind me. I got to have you behind me. Now, from here on out, I'm going to refer to you only as Dennis, and when we slip in, you're going to start banging me hard.
Okay, good.
And then we cut to Charlie and Dennis listening to this, and Charlie just says, well, Mac's gay. And they've decided that this is a twisted role play scenario where he wants to imagine that Dennis is banging him, which is not that far off from the truth. But
it's true. And that might be the first one where one of the gang very explicitly is just like, well, he's gay. Yeah.
Yep.
And then this is happening sort of throughout the rest of the show up to a point when he actually comes out, which we'll get to. But I think from my notes, it really starts to pick up in like season 8 or around there that people are pretty consistently like, yeah, Mac's.
Yeah, it's just like a known fact that Mac is a closeted gay man, but he's never going to come out because he's way too Catholic. Okay, then we have an episode, season 9, episode 5, Mac Day, where we learn that the gang does a thing where each member of the gang gets presumably one day every year that is their day. And for the 24 hours of their day, everyone else in the gang has to do whatever they want them to do. And so Mac's day starts with a lecture at midnight, several hours of lecture about things from the Bible. And we come in on the gang as after the lecture has ended, and they're having a conversation about the contents of the lecture and the interesting choices that Mac has made. So Charlie says 7 straight hours of lecturing.
Dennis says, yeah, and 5 hours alone dedicated to the evils of homosexuality from him.
D says, did anyone else notice he had an erection the entire time?
Charlie, of course.
Frank, how could you miss it?
Charlie, I mean, it was like shooting. And then Mac walks into the room, so they
Yeah.
have to cut off their conversation.
And then in this episode, Mac's cousin from the country, who we will call Country Mac because that's what they call him in the show, arrives. And it's Sean William Scott in a perfectly cast role, who is sort of everything that Mac wishes he was. Mac is very preoccupied with being badass, with seeming cool, with he's like thinks of himself as the security guard of their bar who could handle any conflict, and like everything about what he wishes he could be, Country Mac is. And so Country Mac is just the coolest. He rides a motorcycle. He's so chill. They're trying to do a stunt during the day where Mac's going to pretend to jump off a bridge, and Country Mac just does jump off the bridge to do the stunt. And he just is like showing him up all day. And then finally Mac has taken them to the pièce de résistance of Mac Day, which is they're at a bodybuilder competition and they have volunteered to oil up the bodybuilders because this is an important public service that needs to be done. And at this event, when all of the gang is standing around like, I cannot believe, first of all, I can't believe Mac expects us to do this. Second of all, I can't believe Mac doesn't realize that he's gay, basically. Like, he's just ogling all of these men. And Country Mac comes over and they find out Country Mac is also gay, but he's out. And he's like loud and proud, nothing wrong with it. And the gang is like, that is so refreshing. They have a whole conversation like, it's so great when people are openly gay. God, that's awesome. It's so much more comfortable when someone's gay and open about it.
Gee, it's fantastic.
Charlie says, I know we've never said this as a group, but, and then the whole gang goes, Mac's gay.
Yeah.
Yeah. We're all in agreement.
And then, not important to our narrative, but the button end of this episode is Country Mac rides off on his motorcycle and he gets like 50 feet away and then just tips over and hits his head and dies.
You know, Country Mac lived hard and he didn't wear a helmet is the issue with Country Mac.
The camera stays in one place as he drives away, and then he's just a little in the distance and he just falls over. So good.
It's really good. That's a great fucking episode.
Sad that Sean William Scott can never come back, you know?
I know, because he was perfect. The casting was amazing. He was great as Country Mac.
Okay, so that's just a couple of moments. There's more throughout the show until we get to season 11, episode 9, The Gang Goes to Hell, which... Did Mac win this cruise? Did he win something to take them all on this?
I think Mac has become a member of a new church.
Yes.
He's found a new, cool, hip, young church led by young pastors. And he's like, this is great. I'm going to, it doesn't seem like they're Catholic, so I'm not really sure how he's doing this. But anyway, he's bought into this new church, and the church is having a cruise, a church cruise that's all like God themed. And so he somehow, it feels like he must have won it or something, because I don't know how he got the other people to come, but they all go on this cruise, and the two young, cool pastors turn out to be gay and in love with each other. And so this is a real blow to Mac's conception of people of God. And then at some point, he is like, I have to do something about this. He shows up at their room and basically is like, I'm going to convert you guys.
Because the part of the back and forth too with Mac in religion is he's like, God is punishment. And people keep being like, God is love, dude. And he's like, no.
Well, he's Catholic, you know?
It's true. And it's worth saying too, as terrible as all these people are, most of them have had terrible lives. Mac has 2 parents who hate him. And it's
yes. I mean, sad. They all have really struggled in their childhoods. They are traumatized.
It's pretty sad. So anyway, Mac, after having a great time on this cruise, doing some musical theater that he really enjoys.
Oh, he loves the musical theater.
He does. He does go to convert them. And one of the pastors says, You want to convert us? Do you realize how insulting that is? How would you like it if I tried to convert you?
Max says, I wouldn't care because that's like impossible. There's no way you guys could convert me to your lifestyle.
And Pastor says, let's give it a shot.
And they pull him into their room, and then there's like a 5 minutes later on the screen, and he shows up in the brig where all the rest of the gang are, and he walks in and says, well, I'm gay.
And it says, yeah, no shit.
Oh, you guys knew this already? And
That-
they're all just like,
that
yeah,
you were
yeah,
gay?
yeah. From the day we met, always.
And then very stupidly, Matt closes the door behind him to the brig, and so now they're all trapped in there.
And then the ship starts to sink while they're all trapped in the brig.
It seems like everyone's forgotten about them.
Yep, because there's a crisis happening. And so this is a 2-part season finale thing. So we get over into the final episode of season 11. Things are not looking good. They are sinking. The water is rising. They're all sort of like making peace with each other. I think Dennis and Dee tell each other they love each other, which is not something that they do. They all decide they're going to give up on life. They sink to the bottom of the water. They're all holding hands. It's a poignant moment for It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. And then they end up getting saved. And Mac is like, the only way we could have been saved is through a miracle. It has to be God. And so then at the end, they're all giving their reports about what happened to a police officer. And Mac says, can you mark down in your report that I'm not gay? Because I'm not.
Charlie says, what? What do you mean you're not gay? He's gay.
And Mac says, well, because God answered my prayers and saved us, that means there is, of course, a God. And if there is a God, then in his infinite wisdom, there's no way he could have made me queer. So I'm straight.
All right.
So he's just back in the closet at the end of season 11.
Mm-hmm. So that moves us forward to season 12, episode 6, next season. Hero or Hate Crime, which is an interesting episode where Dee has a scratch off lottery ticket that blows out of her bag while she's on the street. Meanwhile, Charlie and Mac are walking towards her and Dennis on the street. Mac sees the scratch off ticket, bends to pick it up. Meanwhile, someone has been raising a piano into an upstairs room. The rope snaps. It starts to fall onto Mac. And Frank, who is like across the street, yells, hey, F word, look out. And everyone turns to look at Mac and sees the piano falling on him. Charlie jump kicks him to get him out of the way, which is incredible.
It's awesome.
And then the whole gang goes for arbitration to determine who should have this scratch-off lottery ticket, which partially pivots on whether or not Frank committed a hate crime by saying that. But of course, if Mac is not gay, it is not a hate crime.
Yes, they come to that after like seeing 3 arbiters that they're like, well, if you're not gay, which you claim to not be gay, then it can't, it's in poor taste, but it's not a hate crime for him to have yelled this.
So then you don't deserve the ticket.
Right. And they all have a claim on the ticket for whatever reason. And then Mac is like, wait, all I have to do is say that I'm gay and then I will get the ticket is what you're telling me? And she's like, well, I guess, yeah. And so then he is like, okay, great, I'm gay. I'm gay. And then they all are like, oh, this is such bullshit. He's just going to go back in the closet because he did that 5 episodes ago. And so he's like, no, I'm gay. And he signs the arbitration agreement and he gets given the thing and he does the scratch off lottery ticket and he wins $10,000. Yeah. And so Mac is like, gay Mac rules. Like he's really psyched about this.
Dennis like, bullshit.
Gay rich Mac, says Mac. He's thinking about what he's going to do with the money. He's got all of these plans.
And Frank says, yeah, sign the paper so you can go back in the closet.
And Mac's like, huh?
And Dennis says, well, you signed the thing. You got your money. Just go back in the closet. Just get it over with.
Charlie says, we know you're going to do it, so you might as well just do it.
And Mac says, yeah, I don't know. Maybe I'll stay out.
Charlie's like, really? And Dennis says, it doesn't matter. You could just go back in. You signed the paper.
No, I think I'm out now. Yeah, I'm gay. Actually feels pretty good. See you guys.
And they all are like, wow, finally, I guess I feel good for him. Amazing. Like they're all taken aback by this. And then he really is out.
Yeah.
He's been out since then on the show.
Rest of the show, canonically gay. Do you want to talk about his invention while we're here in this episode?
Yeah, we should. Part of the arbitration is them trying to prove that he is gay because he's claiming that he's not gay. And Exhibit A in this case to prove that he is gay is a piece of exercise equipment that he has invented for himself that he thinks he's going to be able to sell and make millions of dollars and revolutionize the market. It is an exercise bike where when you pedal the pedals, a, shall we say, phallic object comes out of the seat of the
Dildo.
exercise bike.
It's very clearly a dildo.
And so they're like, it's quite clear what you're doing with this bike. And he's like, that is not what I'm doing with the bike. Here's what's going on with the bike. You know, you're pedaling, you're up on your feet, you're getting tired, you're going to want to sit down, but then it propels you back to your feet.
The dildo popping out of the seat, punching up right in the sort of like asshole area.
Yeah, and they're like, oh, come on, like, it's a dick, it's clearly a dick. And he's like, no, it's not a dick. And they're like, oh, really? And he's like, no, it's a fist. And they're like, oh, okay. Like, oh, Mac. He calls it the ass pounder?
Ass pounder 4,000 or something.
Ass pounder 4,000. And he's proud of it. This comes back. You see it in later episodes. He's not gotten rid of it.
So as we mentioned, Dennis and Mac live together. And they're in the same room, and then in the spare room, all that's there is the ass pounder 4,000.
Yeah, Mac's gotten rid of his bed, and his room is now the exercise room with the ass pounder 4,000. So yeah, there's a little bit of evidence about gay Mac, but it doesn't matter because ultimately he admits it.
He's out.
He comes out and he stays out.
Feels good.
And then the sort of button on the arc of Mac's coming out story.
I was going to say the button on the episode is they make him pay for the arbitration, which costs $9,986.
Oh, that's true. It costs almost $10,000. So he will not be making any money.
As we said, they never really get ahead.
No. Okay, but the button on the coming out storyline is episode 10 of season 13. Mac finds his pride. So the premise of this episode is it's for the Pride Parade in Philadelphia, and the gang wants to have a pride float, and they want Mac to dance on it, because now they have a real gay guy they can use to try to sell their bar. Mac doesn't want to do it because he's feeling really unsettled about his identity and his place as a gay man, and he's just like feeling kind of weird about it. And through conversations with Frank, he decides it's because he hasn't come out to his dad, Luther, who is in prison, who is one of the parents who did not love him, who he has a terrible relationship with. But he keeps thinking he'll be able to salvage this relationship with his awful, awful father. And perhaps a way to do that will be opening up to him about his sexuality. And so he's being really secretive throughout the episode. You can't really tell what he's up to. Frank finds like some woman coming out of his apartment and thinks he must be sleeping with this woman to try to get her pregnant to make his dad happy. Like, it's a whole thing. And then Frank gives him this advice because throughout the episode, Frank's been dealing with this horrible face injury that is like swelling him up like a balloon. And he comes to Mac and he says to him, after he has fixed his problem with his face injury, sometimes you have to let the blood flow to start the healing. Some cuts you just can't plug up. You got to let it out or you're going to be in agony for the rest of your life. And so with this resolve, we go to the prison. Mac's going to tell his dad. And the way that he tells his dad is with a beautiful interpretive
really
dance. It's gorgeous. He does this like amazing dance with a professional dancer in the rain, and it's so like, serious and beautiful, and it's for the whole prison of guys, and they're all sitting there watching this gorgeous dance. And he tells his dad that he's gay, and his dad walks out, but he finishes the dance, and it's like very moving because he's suffering because his dad leaves. And then at the end, Frank, who has been very homophobic the whole time, he watches the dance and he like cries and he says, I get it. He understands Mac's
And I feel
journey.
like even if you're not familiar with the show, you may have seen, I feel like it's become a meme of Frank, like the camera zooming in on Frank and the wide eyes. And I'm saying, like, I get it.
I get it. It's a beautiful moment. Frank is the sort of surrogate father for both Charlie and Mac because neither of them had dads. It's an interesting thing because Dennis and Dee reject him, and it turns out he's not their biological father. But then Frank has become a father figure for the other guys who really need a father figure.
And yeah, we don't have any quotes. I don't know. Do we have quotes about this specific episode? But I was definitely reading like them trying to balance not wanting this to be a joke, right? So like,
sure, we do have quotes about this episode, but I don't know if they're about that in particular.
So it is like an unusually very earnest moment for this show, but they were like, it deserves the wait.
They do them
Yeah.
occasionally, yeah. Well, because this is a thing where the show is absurd. The characters are ridiculous, but they never want it to be a joke that Mac is gay. Mac just happens to be gay and is an absurd person. And so the handling of the coming out storyline is always done in a really respectful and beautiful way, partially because it's really meaningful to Rob McElhenney, whose mother is gay, and he has two gay brothers, I think. So it's like it's an important storyline for him. It's a great scene, and he spent all this time, he doesn't know how to dance, and he spent all this time learning to dance,
Good
and
job.
it sort of explains in canon why all of a sudden at the beginning of season 13 Mac is super ripped for no reason.
He also just goes through body transformations. Who knows what Mac is up
He
to?
does. He gets fat, he gets skinny, he gets ripped, he
He
does it
does.
all. And that's just because Rob McElhenney is really weird and thinks that that's funny.
Fair enough. All right, so that's Mac's arc, and that's happening. But now we've got
Yep.
a coded gay person to a canonically gay person. Who are we shipping him with? What's going on? What's going on in his personal life?
Well, we mentioned that he has this roommate who has been his roommate for multiple decades.
20 years.
There's potentially a little something going on there with their relationship. So we're going to have to tell you a little bit more about Dennis. Who is this man?
He's insane. They're all insane, but he's the most insane? I don't know.
I mean, it varies from episode to episode, but Dennis definitely goes to some of the most extreme extremes of insanity, I would say. There are moments where you're like, are they saying that Dennis is a serial killer? Like, that's where we are with Dennis.
Maybe.
Maybe. I mean, I don't think that they really, really think that, but you are supposed to be
He
wondering.
maybe killed his ex-wife.
It's heavily implied that he did. At one point, he tries to get medication for a friend of theirs that they think is crazy, and he gets medication for borderline personality disorder by just answering questions honestly about himself.
Who knows? Who knows what's going on with Dennis? But anyway, so yes, he and Mac live together, and their relationship, whatever it is, heavily codependent. I think it's safe to say. So our sort of earliest piece of information to share about them is season 5, episode 9. Mac and Dennis break up.
Oh, what a great Mac and Dennis episode. So in this episode, we get a little piece of Mac and Dennis lore, which is that every Tuesday, once a week, they have a movie night where they pretty much always watch the same movie. They watch like Predator, they watch Rambo. And so they have this like movie date night that they do together every week. They have things that they do for the night. And then you start to find out they have a lot of weird things that they do with each other. And Dee comments on it because she finds that they're very codependent and they go everywhere together and they do everything together and they can't be apart for more than a couple of minutes. And she brings this up to them. She asks them how long it's been since they spent more than an hour apart. And they're like, all the time, every day. And she says, without checking in. And they're like, he always checks in with me. He likes to have me check in. So we find out that they text each other at least once an hour every day, all the time, to just stay in touch. You know, it wouldn't be good to be out of contact.
Anything
exactly.
Could happen.
Anything could happen. What if they were in danger and I didn't know? And so because she has brought this up to them, they're like, oh, wait, they start analyzing their own behavior and thinking, is this weird? Are we too close? Like, what, should we be concerned about this? And it drives a wedge between them. Dennis goes to pick up the movie and comes back late. Mac has been worried about him. He called the cops because he didn't come back within an hour. And Dennis has not gotten the right movie. He took the suggestion of the video store clerk guy and got a different movie than the one they're supposed to watch.
Also evidence of how long ago this episode took place in time.
Yes. And it becomes a huge fight. And hilariously, they play it as like a very serious relationship fight that starts ridiculous and becomes real. And they kind of break up. They're like, we need some space from each other. Mac's going to leave and go stay with Charlie. And Dennis, because he can't be alone, goes to Dee's. So most of the episode is like Dennis at Dee's annoying her and Mac at Charlie's annoying him. And will the two of them be able to get back together? So Dennis is calling over to Charlie's just to ask, like, if Mac is asking about him. And Dennis is at Dee's storyline through this episode is there's a cat in her wall that she's trying to
Yes.
get out of the wall. So she's got other stuff going on. But Dennis is just there being obnoxious and like asking her to peel his apples because he's not allowed to eat the skin of the apples because Mac tells him that that's where all the toxins are. And she's like, you're a grown man. Just eat the apple. Who cares about this? And he says, I do not like it with the skin, Dee. I'm not allowed to eat it with the skin. I'm not allowed.
So anyway, they're both driving the rest of the gang completely insane.
Yes, they can only be with each other.
And so Dee contrives to get them back together so that they will all be left alone.
Yes. She tells them that she's setting them each up on a blind date with a big-breasted woman, I believe is how she sells it. And then it's just the two of them having dinner with each other. And they find a way to relight the old spark. And Dee assures them that it's perfectly fine for them to have their old relationship back. She says, I think it's perfectly natural for two grown men to need each other this much. And so they're like, great. And they're just back to their old dynamic.
So, in addition to their movie night, we learn in season 8, episode 9, The Gang Dines Out, that they also have a monthly romantic dinner date at a fancy restaurant.
Guigino's, the nicest Italian restaurant in town. Because of course they do.
And so the sort of setup for this episode is they are at the fancy restaurant at their monthly dinner, and Frank and Charlie come in also to celebrate an anniversary, I think, right?
I think so, yeah.
And there's conflict between the two pairs because neither is paying tribute to the other pair.
Yeah, they see each other across the restaurant and each of them expects the other one to come over to say, like, lovely to see you here. But neither of them does.
And then Dee is also there because she has a Groupon, but she's there alone and she's very nervous that the rest of the gang is going to see her alone and make fun of her for eating by herself. So we're kind of going back and forth between the three groups. And Mac and Dennis get into a little bit of a tiff.
Well, yeah, because Dennis is being particularly moody tonight. They've been seated by the kitchen, which he hates. People keep coming in and out, and Dennis's chair is rickety, and they can't fix it, and they're trying to give him a matchbook, but he doesn't want a matchbook. He wants a chair that's not rickety. And he also is obsessed with the Frank and Charlie thing, and he can't stop talking about it. And Mac just wants his attention. This is their one night a month to, completely focus on each other, even though they do that literally every night at their own home. And so Mac's really frustrated and he's like, you're not focusing on me. And at one point he's going to walk out of the dinner because Dennis is so distracted with everything else going on and Dennis can't let that happen. So he goes up to the mic at this restaurant. There's for some reason a mic. I guess they have like live music sometimes. And he gives a heartfelt speech about his favorite guy in the world. He tells a story about when they were young and they were at a party and he couldn't get up the courage to hook up with some girl. I can't remember the exact story. But Mac, gives him the courage he needs to go for it. And he did, and he succeeded. And the story is about how, the world is a lot safer with Mac in it. Oh, he's not saying Mac's name at any point, but clearly he's speaking directly to Mac. And then he sings, "You are the wind beneath my wings" to Mac. And then he goes back over to sit down at Mac's table. And Mac's like, yeah, that was really awesome. Who are you talking about?
Oh, Mac. You gotta be very explicit with Mac.
You do. He doesn't have room for a lot of subtlety. You gotta tell him, this is about you, Mac McDonald. Lovely speech, though.
Okay, our next fun Dennis Mac moment is from season 9, episode 6, The Gang Saves the Day. The premise of this episode is the gang has gone into a convenience store, and then the convenience store starts to get robbed, and then we see each of the gang's fantasy about what they would do in the course of the robbery. And the first fantasy we see is Max, and Mac's fantasy is basically that he's a super badass in an action movie.
Obviously.
And he kicks the robber's ass, and then a bunch of other like ninjas show up and he kicks their asses and sort of just saves the day. But the robbery ends with Dennis clutching him and telling him he can't live without him. And then
because Mac's gotten a fatal injury in the course of this.
And then crying as Mac passes on. And when Mac goes to heaven, all the angels are shirtless hot dudes wearing wings, and he takes the throne with hot God, sexy Jesus.
Yeah, he takes the throne next to hot shirtless God, and they're gonna rule forever together.
That's a fantasy.
Nice, of course. One day, Dennis will appreciate him as his real fantasy. but we yet to see if that will ever actually happen. Despite the fact that we did see that lovely speech from Dennis about Mac. Mac doesn't even notice when Dennis does appreciate him, so that's kind of a problem. Anywho. Okay. The next classic Mac and Dennis episode is season 11, episode 5. Mac and Dennis move to the suburbs. The premise of this one is the two of them are. This is after their apartment's burned down for one of the multiple times it's burned down. They're looking for a place to live in Philadelphia, but these rental prices are out of control.
We should say they had a rent-controlled apartment that they purposely burnt down.
Well, they let it burn down. I don't know that they purposefully burned it down.
They locked everyone into the apartment when it was on fire.
Yeah, but they didn't set the fire. They saw that there was a fire and they realized...
Did not call the fire department.
The solution to their problem, which was they had brought everyone that they had a beef with to their apartment, is to just lock them in the burning apartment. So yes, anyway, they don't have an apartment. They need one. They can't find one that's reasonably priced. And they realize that if they are willing to live out in the suburbs, the rental prices are much cheaper. In fact, they could even get a full house in the suburbs for what they would be paying in the city. And Frank does not believe that they can survive out in the suburbs. They're city rats. They are used to living in the city and being close to everything that they want to be close to. And he thinks they're going to go crazy out in the suburbs, basically. And so Frank makes them a wager that if they can live in this house in the suburbs for a month, that he will pay their rent for a year. And if they cannot live in the house in the suburbs for a month, they will have to sleep in a bed with an old man for a year. Which is the kind of wager that can happen in It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. You're thinking, where will he find an old man willing to sleep in a bed with them? Don't worry about it. He can source an old man with no problem. And Dee, for some reason, inserts herself into this because she's like, it would be so easy to live in the suburbs. They're going to win this no problem. I want a prize if they're able to live in the suburbs. But now if they lose, she's also going to have to sleep in the bed with the old man and the two of them.
Yes. I believe Frank promises to buy them a California King if they lose. And so if they win, she'll get the California King for herself. But if not, then they all have to sleep for people in a California King bed with an old man.
So, as you might expect, things quickly start to go wrong for the two of them living in the suburbs. They fall into this hilariously tropey relationship where there's a lot to take care of at the house. They decide maybe one of them should stay home. Mac can stay home and see to everything at the house while Dennis goes into work every day. And then they've fallen into this thing where there's this tension of Dennis hating his commute and having to go into the office, quote unquote, and Mac being left home alone all day with nothing to do. And it leads to all sorts of conflict and hysterical married couple tropes. At one point, Dennis walks in on Mac in silk pajamas sitting with a pool boy, and he gets pretty upset about that. They have a fight where Mac's trying to express how lonely he's been at home all the time by himself. And he says, at least Dennis gets to go to work. And Dennis is like, oh, I get to go to work. It's every fight you've ever seen between a married couple. And then everything comes to a head in this fight where Mac confronts Dennis because he's saying to him, everything I do for you, and everything you do for yourself. And he brings out PI photos of Dennis kind of cheating on him by going to various restaurants and not going to work when he says he's at work. And he calls the bar and Dennis isn't even there. It's a big fight. Throughout the whole episode, Mac's been hearing beeping from the fire, like a smoke detector that needs a new battery.
A smoke detector, and I can't understand why they don't just replace the battery.
Well, because I'm sure they don't have a smoke detector in their apartment. I think he probably doesn't know what that is. And so he's like, are you hearing this beeping? And all along, Dennis has been saying, I don't hear anything, just to drive him crazy. And when it's all come to a head, there's a great moment where Mac's like, I can't believe you're not hearing this beeping during the fight. And Dennis says, newsflash, asshole, I've been hearing it the entire goddamn time.
And why wouldn't you say anything?
Because I hate you. So things could easily have turned to murder, but at this point, the gang knocks on the door because it's like the final minutes of the month of them living together. And they're like, we did it. We made it. We made it to the end. We're going to get a free year of rent. And then they realize that the year of rent that Frank is going to pay for is at this house in the suburbs. And they can't do it.
And so at the last minute, they lose. And you know what? There's an interesting level of continuity that runs throughout this show. And so, yes, for the next year-ish of the show, we do see them sleeping with this old man and Dee all in one bed. It
Yep.
does continue on, so consequences.
Yeah, there are consequences to a lot of their actions and wagers and bets in this show, hilariously.
So we skip ahead to next season, season 12, episode 7, which is an episode called PTSD. And there's sort of two storylines happening in this episode. One, Dee is trying to prove that sleeping with her is not the nadir of a man's life.
Hard to prove, honestly.
And also, Frank and Mac have been playing this VR game that's like a war game. And Mac is finding it very difficult and feels like he's getting PTSD from playing this war
Well,
game.
it's very realistic, and they are committing war crimes against people in the game. It's pretty dark.
They are. So he's having trouble sleeping. He's having nightmares. He's just having a tough time. So at one point, he's having a trauma dream about the game. And he wakes up and he goes into the living room and he sees Dennis dancing seductively, shirtlessly.
Yep.
And Dennis dances over to him, grabs his face, and pulls him in for a kiss. And then Mac wakes up again. It's another dream.
Yeah.
And then he walks in on Dennis dancing shirtless just like before, but now theoretically it's real. Dennis dances over to him, and Mac gets very excited. And then Dennis shuts the door in his face. Dennis is.
Poor Mac.
I guess there's a third plot in this where Dennis is working as like a stripper.
Yeah.
He it's something to do with the last guy that Dee dated, who she's trying to prove she's not the worst thing that ever happened to him, was a stripper, and he's like, oh, I could do that too. And
Yeah.
so now he's stripping with Charlie. Charlie, of course, is the boy.
Charlie's his boy. If you're a stripper, you have to have a boy.
Yes.
And I think it's interesting that this episode with the dream about Dennis is the episode immediately after Hero or Hate Crime, when Mac officially comes out of the closet. And so then they do an immediate episode where it's like, Mac is not only officially gay, but also in love with Dennis, if you didn't already know.
Didn't grok to that. Okay,
Yeah.
so then the next episode, season 12, episode 8, The Gang Tends Bar. Tell me about it.
A beautiful episode. It's Valentine's Day, and the gang, surprisingly, seems to really like Valentine's Day for the most part. They make Valentines for each other, and it's kind of interesting, not what you would expect from them, except for Dennis, who for some reason is very anti-Valentine's Day and just wants everybody to do their job, which is not something that happens a lot in the bar. Meanwhile, Mac's plotline is he has found a crate in the alley, a mysterious crate that he wants everyone to go open because there could be anything in there. And Dennis throughout is like, there's nothing in the crate. It's just garbage. This is insane. And so he's trying to get everyone to focus through the whole episode. They're all doing their own insane shit, as they always do. And finally, we get to the end. We realize that there's like a previous incident that had made them stop doing Valentine's, which was an anthrax incident. Yes. And finally, Dennis admits that it was him because he never gets any Valentines. He was really sad about Valentine's Day because no one gives him Valentines. And it comes to a head and he's yelling at the gang because they have accused him of not having any feelings, which is sort of a running thing with Dennis. He either has no feelings or has tamped them down so hard that he's keeping himself from feeling any feelings, is a thing he talks about a lot. But in this case, he says, I have feelings. Of course I have feelings. I have big feelings, okay? And it hurts. Okay, so that's why I hate Valentine's Day, and that's why I put anthrax in the box. And then Mac walks in.
Says, Dennis?
What?
I got the crate.
So what?
Open it.
I'm not going to open a goddamn crate, Mac. There's nothing in it.
Just open it.
You want me to open the crate? I'll open the goddamn crate. If it'll get you to stop focusing on it and get you to stop focusing on this goddamn Valentine's Day bullshit. I don't know why you're so excited about this goddamn thing. There's never anything inside. And he opens it and stops in his tracks and says, what is this?
It's a gift. I got it for you.
For me?
Yeah.
You got this for me?
I ordered it off the dark web. I wanted it to be a surprise.
He pulls it out. It's an RPG.
Yeah.
It says, and how did you know that I wanted an RPG?
Because I know you, man. Also, you casually mention RPGs like a weird amount.
Is this true? And the rest of the gang is like, yeah. And Dennis says, this is cool. I still think Valentine's Day is a bullshit holiday, but this is nice.
Want to shoot it?
Yes. Where's the rocket?
And they look for it, and there's no rocket in the box. And Max says, oh, they forgot to put the rocket in there, dude. I'm so sorry.
Dennis says, Mac, I don't care. I love it. And there's like romantic music swelling in the background. You figured out the one thing I wanted more than anything else in the entire world, and you got it for me. And it's perfect.
Happy Valentine's Day.
Oh, yeah.
Aww.
So sweet. It's the sweetest RPG exchange of all time.
It's so sweet and the most ridiculous gift he could get. Comedy.
That's exactly what he wants, you know?
Indeed.
Oh, they're beautiful.
So, next episode. Is this literally the next episode? We've got a lot in a row here.
Season 12 has a lot of good MacDennis stuff. And then things get weird in season 13, and it takes them a while to recover, but we'll get to that.
Okay, this season 12, episode 10 is called Dennis's Double Life. Dennis bursts into the bar. He's like out of breath, and he tells everyone that they need to pretend he's a different guy and that Dee is actually his. Who's Dee? His ex-wife?
Something like that, like not his sister. And he's like, and I'm not Dennis. You just go along with whatever is about to happen, basically. I'm Brian.
You're Priscilla.
And they just need to go along. Yeah.
And a woman with a child follows shortly after. And she's like, why did you run away? And it turns out that in a previous episode, they had been trying to break who's the baseball player?
Wade Boggs.
Wade Boggs' record of drinking 70 beers on a flight. Through the course of that episode, because Frank gave a kid on the plane a bunch of downers or something, they had to stop in North Dakota, and Dennis just elected to get off the plane.
You don't think about it at the time.
It's true.
But apparently, he got up to something in North Dakota.
So, yes, he was in North Dakota for a bit. The woman comes into the bar. She has a child. It turns out while he's in North Dakota, he slept with this woman, and she got pregnant, and this is his child, and he is not Dennis. He is Brian.
Brian Lefebvre, a classic alter ego. And this child is Brian Jr.
Brian Jr. And so Dennis needs to figure out how to get out of this situation. And so
he's like, please, anybody have any suggestions?
Yes. The solution they come up with is he's gay and he is emotionally invested in his relationship with Mac. So they figure that this woman, what she really wants is an emotional investment. And so if he's not emotionally available, she'll leave.
Yeah. So this plan wins out. And Mac is his gay lover, of course.
Sure.
Because who else would it be? They live together. So Mandy shows up at the apartment. Mac is there. She wasn't expecting it. She says, hey, so I don't mean to interrupt here, Brian, but you never told me you had a roommate.
And Mac says, it's time, Brian.
Dennis says, here's where things get a little bit tricky. There's really no easy way to say this, but Mac and I aren't just friends. He's actually my
lover.
Partner.
Yes, well, we do make love.
We don't actually make love.
He's the power bottom. Now he generates a tremendous amount of power from the bottom.
This is a running joke with them, by the way. I don't actually.
Don't sell yourself short. He does.
No, it's not that. It's just that we don't have sex. Yeah, I sleep with women, but I'm emotionally involved with Mac, which is why, and this is the hard part, I don't have room emotionally in my life for you. I'm obsessed with how real the I sleep with women but I'm emotionally involved with Mac confession is.
It's very true.
He can only be honest when he's trying to lie.
It's very true.
So then this woman is like, well, that's fine. She's super chilled. I love Mandy, by the way. She's like very calm and normal.
Again, a very normal person that these insane people are butting up against. And at every turn, she's just like, okay.
Okay. So she's like, well, that's fine if you're with Mac. I'm not like trying to be in a relationship with you. I just thought you might want a relationship with your kid. So if the two of you want to be involved in his life, that's fine too.
It'd be great for this kid to have two dads.
Yeah. And then Mac immediately is like, we'll do it. When Dennis is like, what are you talking about? So he pulls him aside to confront Mac about what his plan is here. And he says, why did you say you wanted to raise the kid?
I just got caught up in the moment, you know? It was so exciting. Maybe we should do it.
We are not a couple, Mac.
Well, no, we would just keep pretending.
I am not going to pretend to be in a relationship with you for the entirety of my child's life. Are you insane? Look, okay, you know what? I can't handle this right now. I'm going to go sleep in your room. You can sleep on the couch. And this is when he opens the door to Mac's room, and there is no bed. There is only the
it's the
I wrote Blaster 4000.
Is that what it's called?
I don't know. I thought it was Pounder. Whichever it is, his exercise bike. And Dennis is like, what is this?
Hold on, I'm Googling it, which I may regret.
Oh, good. Make sure you include It's Always Sunny.
It's the ass pound. It's the ass pounder.
Ass
4000.
Pounder. The Ass Pounder 4000 is inside. And Dennis says, "What is this?"
And Matt says, "This is the gym."
Uh-huh. And where were you going to sleep?
Well, I figured since we got used to sleeping in the same bed at Dee's, that we could just sort of continue that here.
And for some reason, Dennis isn't having it. I don't know why.
Well, in the end, the gang is so insane that Mandy is just like, you could have just said you didn't want to have a relationship with this kid and we would have gone.
And then, in an interesting turn, Dennis decides he does want a relationship with his kid. He doesn't want the kid to be raised like he was by a father that was never around. And so he leaves. At the end of season 12, he moves to North Dakota. Glenn was actually trying to leave the show at this point because he had another show, but they dragged him right back in. So they paper over this in season 13 a little bit uneasily. But when we get into season 13, in the first episode, Mac has been abandoned by Dennis. How is he handling it?
He's replaced Dennis with a life-size replica that is very clearly just a sex doll.
And whenever they confront him about it being a sex doll, he's like, no, I just want him for companionship, you know?
Mhm.
And then that episode, they've tried to replace Dennis with a new person who is Mindy Kaling, who's like scheming and much more put together. But they think, yeah, she's great. We like her even more than Dennis. And then at the end of the episode, Dennis comes back and they're like, oh, actually, we're fine with Dennis. We'll just keep Dennis and you can leave. Dennis takes in stride the Dennis sex doll that Mac has created.
Not surprised at all.
But weirdly, this season is kind of a lot of Dennis distancing himself from Mac. I don't have all of the moments of it, but there is an episode where they go to a sexual harassment seminar because someone in the city has made a list of bars where it's not safe to go if you don't want to be sexually harassed, and Patty's is on the list of these bars. And so if they like complete this course, then they'll be taken off the list is the premise of it. And so Dennis by the end is giving a speech about all of the different groups of people, I guess, that time is up for. He has like a speech for each of them. And then he's saying like, time's up for ugly people, time's up for rich people. And he now gets to time's up for gay men. And this is a speech for Mac in particular. So he's gone through the list of people that time is up for. Now time's up for gay men. And this is his speech to Mac. But Dennis, you're saying, I can't be ugly, and it doesn't matter because I'm gay. Well, guess what, pal? You are ugly. And it doesn't matter how much you work out. It's never going to change that fact. You've also objectified tons of men, including me. You know, you gotta stop kissing me, man. I don't want it. I don't want you touching me at all, okay? It's never going to happen, all right? Not willingly. Your time's up. And you're like, damn.
Boo. Boo. This is also the season where he explicitly tells Mac like he doesn't want him to be his roommate.
Yeah, there's an episode where they are experiencing sort of alternate realities because they realize that your memory is really your experience of real life, and if everyone's memory is different, then reality is different for them. And so they find themselves in Dennis's head in his own alternate reality, and they realize it's his because he says that he doesn't want Mac to be his roommate. So in this reality, Mac is not his roommate, and you're like, God damn, Dennis, like, what happened to you in North Dakota?
Who knows?
So he really spends most of season 3 pushing Dennis away, and then
Season 13,
sorry, pushing Mac away, and then we get to season 14, and Mac is trying to claw him back. So unsurprising that we get season 14, episode 4, the gang chokes.
So in this episode, we learn. Well, I guess the premise of this episode is Frank starts choking at the restaurant at Gugino's, of course.
Obviously.
With the whole gang there, and no one moves to save him. So this waiter, this recurring waiter who they all hate, does save him. And they each have to sort of deal with the fact that no one moved to save him.
Yeah. Even Charlie, his roommate and bestie.
Yeah. Dee's thing is she like realizes she's exhilarated by the possibility of almost dying. So she kind of becomes a daredevil throughout the rest of the episode. But Mac is like, Dennis didn't say that I could save him, so I can't. And the rest of the episode, like the Mac Dennis storyline, again becomes around the control. Who has the control?
Yes.
in their
And Dennis
relationship.
starts to be sort of repulsed by the fact that Mac wants his approval for every little thing that he does. And so their arc is that by the end of the episode, Mac realizes that he's his own man and Dennis will respect him more if he doesn't do exactly what Dennis tells him to do. But the way that he is attempting to make Dennis to seize back the control in their relationship is Dennis has a lot of healthcare concerns. He's very particular about what he eats and the various things he does. He doesn't have any gluten. He doesn't have any sugar. And then we find out, like, for some reason, Dennis is being very weak and sick in this episode, and you don't really know why. And then it turns out that Mac has been feeding him shakes that are just blended up pizza and soda. Like,
He's so bad.
which somehow he hasn't noticed how disgusting these shakes are. But Charlie tastes one and he asks Mac, "Are you feeding him blended up pizza and soda shakes? Why are you doing that?"
Because I'm poisoning him, all right? Just a little bit. All the gluten and the sugar and the dairy, it just wreaks havoc on his system and it makes him so weak. And then he's going to depend on me to take care of him, to bring him back from the brink of death.
Why are you doing that?
Well, because I want him to depend on me, Charlie.
Oh, it's a classic Mac plan, really. And so then by the end, the final scene is Mac and Charlie scheme together because Mac wants to, impress Dennis. Charlie needs to win Frank back over and prove to him that he is dependable in a crisis. And so their plan is to poison Frank and then have an EpiPen available to then save Frank and prove to him that they're trustworthy. Mac thinks that they should poison Dennis instead, but they're not for that. So they've decided on Frank instead, and Mac says, "Now, of course, Dennis will see through that ruse as well, but he'll be very impressed with how far I'm willing to go to prove my worth to him. Then Dennis will love me." And honestly, he kind of does, because what ends up happening in the scene is that Dee poisons herself instead because she wants to chase the high of near death. And then Mac is sitting there with the EpiPen and she's dying on the ground and they're all like, "Save her! Why are you not saving Dee?" And he's like, "I've decided that I don't want to." And Dennis gives him this look like, "I'm very impressed that you're not doing what I'm telling you to do." So,
but luckily that waiter is there and he does save Dee.
Yep. And then Dee ends up not liking her near-death experience at all, so she's over that.
It was not fun to almost die, apparently.
No.
So, skipping ahead to season 14, episode 5 is another great moment in the Dennis-Mac relationship. The gang goes to the zoo in this episode called The Gang Tex. And so the different members of the gang sort of want to see different things at the zoo. Dennis and Dee want to see the lion get fed. In particular, Dennis really wants to see the lion get fed, and Dee...
Oh, yeah, Dee just doesn't want to get lost because she has a traumatic childhood experience where she was left alone at the zoo and some goats were mean to her or something like that. And so she just is sticking with Dennis so she doesn't get abandoned.
Yes. At the beginning, Mac and Charlie are planning to go see the meerkats because they watched a documentary about them and they're very excited about the meerkats. And Frank wants to taunt the gorillas with some bananas.
Yeah. But the reason it's called the gang text is Mac has started a group text chain for all the gang so that they can stay in contact. And it becomes a conversation about like the subtleties of texting and what gets lost in speech when you're communicating with each other that way. And so Mac's style of texting is these very long paragraphs expressing everything he could ever want to say. And Dennis is pissed at him because he has kept Dennis from seeing the lions get fed. And so...
Yes. They were looking for each other in the park, so he wandered away from the lion feeding to try to find him. And there was a mix-up around sea lions. So Dennis was at the lions to see the lions, but Charlie and Mac thought that they were at the SEA, sea lions.
Yes.
And now Dennis has missed the lion feeding, the one thing he really wanted to see. And of course, you could never go back to the zoo to see the lions get fed.
So Mac decides, I'm going to clear things up with Dennis by sending him a message.
It's great too because you've been seeing the text come up on the screen and there's like a lot of back and forth about emoji use, and then you see Mac text for like a split second and up on the screen is a full, just a wall of text.
You have to pause to get the time to read it all. And of course Dennis texts back like, "K."
Yeah. So the first text is, there's a lot of ellipses in here, which I guess we're not going to say, but like there's no space, there's just ellipses. So Dennis, I feel like you're ignoring me. I think this is all just a big misunderstanding because of these texts, and you can't tell how I'm feeling when I'm texting. I was just trying to check in on you to make sure you are okay, just like everyone else in the group. We should meet up and get back on track. Let us know that you are okay. Okay? Lol, you know what I mean? You aren't mad at me, though, right? I just want this trip to be the bomb for you. I always try to put a lot of hard work into our relationship. I tell you that your face looks smooth even when I find a wrinkle. I dye your hair, and I massage your pecs after a workout to keep you nice and limber. I make you shakes, and I put in all this work for us so I can enjoy a smile on your face at the end of the day. And then Dennis texts back like, "Okay."
Okay.
And then Mac is still spiraling, and he's trying to go to the meerkats with Charlie, but he's like, let me just text Dennis
I'll
again.
just
And he
text him one
texts
more
him,
time.
"Hi, Dennis. How was the lion feeding? Please let me know where you are and if you are okay. I don't want to sound annoying, but I really want to be happy when you witness it. You are my best friend, and this trip to the zoo is really important to me and us as best friends. I know Dee can be a stupid bitch, but you should not take that shit out on me. I just want what's best for you and to make sure you are happy. I love you so much, like a good friend would love another good friend, not in a gay way, though, even though I am gay. Actually, I am really, really gay, but not for you necessarily. I just like a lot of your qualities as a man. Anyways, not to get off topic, text me back, please. I need to know you are having fun." And it just like goes off the page.
God, I love him. So then, yeah, the culmination of this is Mac and Charlie wanting to go see the Meerkats. Mac is very distracted by this Dennis situation, and he
Mm-hmm.
decides he needs to sneak off to a bathroom because he realizes that bathrooms at the zoo are a gay hookup spot on Grindr because there's all of these fathers here with their kids who sneak off to the bathroom. And so he goes into a bathroom and happens to run into Dennis, who comes in.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, "Oh my God, you're here to talk to me, unless this is a Grindr situation." And so Dennis confronts him about making him miss the Lions. And Mac sort of supplicates himself to Dennis, who, as they've been talking about all episode with the Meerkats, pisses on him for dominance. And
Mm-hmm.
and
This is the
as
second time Mac has been pissed on for dominance.
Charlie does it first.
Yeah. But in the end, they do go to see the meerkats, and
Yep.
it really reaffirms their feeling about life and being in a group. And they leave, and
Mhm.
they're like, "Wow, we really lose a lot through texting when we can't like
Yeah.
see each
They
other."
all make meaningful eye contact through those little bubbles that they let you pop up in the meerkat exhibit.
Yeah,
Nothing like a little real human contact to reaffirm your relationship.
they're not wrong about text. Tone can really be lost,
It's true, it's true. Then, season 15, we have nothing. A dead zone.
Yeah, what the hell happens in season 15?
I'm sure I wrote something down. Well, that's when they go to Ireland. So there's stuff with Mac's identity actually in season 15
Oh,
where he
yeah.
thinks like Irish is his most important identity, but then he thinks that he finds out he's not Irish, and then he decides gay is his most important identity, and they have this back and forth of Dennis being like, identity doesn't have to be everything. If you want to go fuck everybody in Ireland, go ahead. It's not about your identity. Just do whatever you want to do. He finds out he is Irish after all, so his identity can stay.
That's fine. They were just playing a prank on him to make him think he was Dutch.
It was a great prank. They got his mother to tell him that he wasn't actually Irish, that his dad's real name was Luther Vandross. What a good bit. Anyway, we make it through season 15. We get to season 16, and honestly, we're kind of back in a good place with Mac and Dennis. I feel like we're back on track with their relationship. We start the premiere episode, The Gang Inflates, where the two of them are very much a unit again. They're roommates. They have sold all of their furniture for some reason. We find out that they've been renting their couch for the past 2 decades. And so they get rid of this, and Mac finds a new solution because they can't afford actual new furniture. He gets inflatable furniture, and they decide this is going to be a scheme. They're going to sell it, etc. But for some reason, they are sharing their inflatable bed together this episode for unexplained reasons. They're having sort of like married people fights in the bed because Mac has been eating off-brand fancy nuts all episode that he is clearly allergic to. Yeah. And he won't go to the hospital.
And he's convinced it's not the nuts, it's inflating the inflatable furniture.
And so Dennis wants him to go to the hospital because he clearly is about to die. And he says, "Oh, and spend the remainder of our nut on medical bills?" I don't think so, Dennis. So this is what we get from this episode. They have a shared nut, and they share their one inflatable mattress together when 3 seasons ago, Dennis was not willing to share a bed with Mac, but now he is.
Back, baby.
We're back.
He's got the North Dakota fully out of his system.
Yes. And then we get to Frank versus Russia.
Okay, so we need to talk about the Dennis system, I think, in order to talk about...
We have to set up the Dennis system.
So I believe that episode is just called the Dennis system
Hmm.
or whatnot. And so the Dennis system is Dennis's foolproof plan to getting a woman to sleep with you, with each letter of Dennis standing for another step in the system. D stands for demonstrate value. E, engage physically. N, nurturing dependence. N, neglect emotionally. I, inspire hope. S, separate entirely. So you show a woman that you have value, you engage her physically, you get her to be dependent on you, and then you nag her, you neglect her
Hmm.
emotionally, so then she becomes obsessed with you, and then you come back and say like, "Oh, but we could be together," and then she's hopeful, and then after you sleep together, you're like, "Okay, bye."
Yeah.
And that's the Dennis
The Dennis
system.
system works every time.
Indeed.
And so, at the beginning of Frank versus Russia, we have Mac having boy problems. He's been dating a
Mhm.
guy online that he hasn't been able to convince to meet him in person.
Mhm. The guy online has been communicating to him via anal beads.
Yes, they're don't not to worry, they're in constant communication via the anal beads.
Mhm.
And whenever this guy Johnny wants to meet up with Mac, he will engage the beads. Mac will know to go to a hotel to meet him, and as yet he hasn't shown up at the hotel, but he will someday, and it's gonna be
Because they're in
hot.
love.
Yes, because he is in love with him. So he's having that problem. Dee is having boy problems too for some reason. I don't really remember her
Mhm.
exact setup, but they're asking Dennis for help for whatever reason. And so Dennis at first doesn't want to help them, and then he's like, you know what? You guys are so useless that I will help you. And he pulls out the easel. The gang are always giving each other presentations on an easel.
Yes.
And he says, as you're both aware, I have a foolproof system for attracting a woman, but I also have a foolproof system for attracting a man.
And they go, "Ooh, awesome.
Yeah,
Why?"
no way. How come?
And Dennis goes, "Shh, shh."
Okay, so he gets into this presentation of the system. He is doing it letter by letter, and
Mhm.
it's another lettered system. The steps are: S, suppress your instincts; I, inflate his ego; N, need his power; N, negate his power; E, engage physically; and D, do you want a tissue? Because the final step of what is revealed to be called the SIND system, which is Dennis
Mhm.
backwards. How did that happen?
How did that
Uh,
happen?
is to make the man feel like you are his mommy, because that is what will
Mhm.
make him fall in love with you. And it explains literally everything about the Mac and Dennis relationship,
It does.
because they both have these weird mommy issues, can't make their mommies love them, and, like Dennis cannot eat apple skins because Mac tells him he's not allowed to. Like this is the
Yeah,
relationship that they have with each
sure.
other.
Although, as you alluded to, it is really great when he reveals it's the sin system, and then he points out to them that it's Dennis spelled backwards, and they're like, "What are the
What are
odds?"
the odds? Oh, I did it on purpose.
They're like, "Oh, yeah."
So anyway, he sets them both up on dates. He will be there to observe the dates to make sure that they go appropriately well. They are both terrible at them, but ultimately the SIN system does work. The tissue thing, very successful.
Kills every time.
And so they both are able to hook up with their guy or whatever. They come in the next day, and both of them have screwed it up now and will never be seeing that guy again. So Max says he's not going on a second date with his guy, but for good reason. He says, I have a really good reason, because I'm just a boy in love. I'm a boy in love with Johnny. Dennis makes a really interesting face when he says this. And I
Mhm.
realize I have to be with him.
So Dennis says, "No, see, that's the thing. Johnny doesn't love you. He doesn't even like you."
You don't know him.
No, no, no. You don't know him.
I know him better than you.
Do you? Because I am him.
What?
I invented Johnny as a means of getting you out of the apartment when you were irritating me.
I don't understand.
Oh, like when Johnny sent you out to go get those soft shell crabs, you remember that? And he was supposed to meet you, but he didn't. He ghosted you, right? And so you came sauntering back in the house all depressed, and I was like, "Well, I'll tell you what, buddy, I'll eat the soft shell crabs. They are my favorite."
And I said, oh my God, what a coincidence, because they're Johnny's favorite too.
Yes, because I am Johnny.
Then who's Dennis?
What do you mean?
Well, if you're Johnny, then who's you?
I'm Dennis. I've always been Dennis. This is going to make it all clear. Okay, this is my phone, and when I push a certain button,
Hold on a second. Johnny's buzzing me. I gotta go.
no, I push the button.
I haven't heard from him in a while, and I'm gonna go to the motel. I gotta meet him.
Mac, I'm still Johnny. I push the button on my phone.
Sorry, I can't engage with you on this right now. I gotta go see Johnny. Mac just completely shuts this down and is like, I will not be processing this information because it's too much to deal with.
So the other plot in this episode, though, is Charlie is trying to get Frank to win a chess tournament via cheating using one of the bars, like your table is ready buzzers or whatever. And then they're going into the final and he realizes they can't use the table buzzer. So they need another method to communicate with Frank how to play the game. And so Dennis figures out that the thing to do is to drug Mac and Frank so they can get the anal beads out of Mac, put them in Frank, and then communicate to Frank how to play the game, unbeknownst to him. And Dennis is controlling the anal beads from inside the truck that they're, sending information to him. And Mac is there, and Mac is like, you stole Johnny's phone.
He's still, by the end of the episode, he still has not processed what has gone on here with Dennis. He can't accept it. He comes to Dennis is like, I think that Johnny broke up with me because I woke up and the beads were gone. The poor guy. This is an interesting one because it's so explicitly insane with the two of them and also leaves a lot of interesting room for, fandom exploration of what happens in the dead spaces of this episode. That's our most recent season 16, and our most recent MacDennis thing. So that's the ship. That's the story. What do all these freaking creators say about this show and why they have done what they've done?
Yes. So Rob and Glenn and Charlie are obviously actors on the show, but they are also the writers and co-creators and, very involved in the whole thing. So this is not a case where there's a separate showrunner who's doing who knows what, and the actors are trying to make things seem a certain way. Like it's all sort of within this shop of people.
Yes. As much as three people can speak with one voice, they are the creative voice of the show.
Yes. And so I think we should start with Rob talking about his character's journey.
Yeah, so all of these first quotes we have from them are going to be about Mac's coming out storyline and how they decided to do this on a show that is so silly. And they've done what is like a pretty serious coming out storyline. So Rob says, we always take whatever viewpoint any character has to the extreme. We have certainly mined plenty of comedy out of the extreme right and the extreme left. We were looking at Mac at one point and I was like, he's such an arch Catholic conservative when it suits him. And when it doesn't, he drops that. And most of the people I know in that camp tend to be fairly homophobic. So we began going down that road. Let's satirize that hard Christian conservative who is also intensely homophobic. Okay, so what's the next step from there? And that's when I thought, let's just make him gay. And so there was an episode where we had a running gag that Mac was in the closet and refused to come out, and everyone there knew he was gay except for him. The joke wasn't that Mac was gay, obviously. That would have been demeaning and offensive. The joke was that he was in the closet and he refused to come out and doubled down on his homophobia. It was just poking fun at the hypocrisy of that. At one point, my character came out and then went back in the closet at the end of the episode. So this is the end of season 11 that we talked about. And Rob says, I didn't expect it, but there was a massive outpouring from our LGBTQ fans who were really upset. They felt like, oh, wow, he finally came out. We feel represented. This is a really fun and cool character. That made them feel like it was a chance for us to do something different, and we put him back in the closet. After the season ended, McElhenney reflected on the decision and thought, man, that is a bummer. We had an opportunity there, and we screwed it up. So a sort of change in the thought process of these guys happens between seasons 11 and 12.
Based on the reaction they hear from the fans.
And so then in season 12, as we talked about, hero or hate crime happens, Mac officially comes out, and then that changes the course of the show. So he comes out, and Rob says the response was so overwhelmingly positive, certainly from the people that we cared about, though of course there was a negative response from a segment of the audience we didn't care about. It felt good that we were recognizing a part of our audience in a way that was not pandering, that wasn't offensive or upsetting or a caricature.
So that's a nice story.
It is a nice story.
But to the end of how they continued to characterize Mac, we also have some quotes from Rob about making sure that the overall tone of the show does not change. So we did have that moment, that dance, which is a very earnest moment and a little bit of a departure, but we don't stay in that tone for Mac by any means.
No.
And so Rob says about keeping Mac a terrible person, we weren't creating a gay character for comedic effect that was there just to be gay and to be funny because he was gay, but a very complex, very disturbed, very fucked up and awful character who happens to be gay. And we ran with that. And then in another interview, he says, I think making sure that we are very careful to not change the fact that Mac is an abhorrent person. And that was something we made a concerted effort on to make sure we were servicing a very large part of our community, which is the LGBTQ community. And we wanted to make sure that we were having a character who was going to come out in a way that would feel satisfying and be in the tone of Sunny, while also not just all of a sudden dramatically changing Mac's character, because that just wouldn't resonate with Sunny. And I feel like that's something I hear over and over again from our fans who say, hey, man, it's great that Matt came out and it's great that you didn't change him. And he's still so unlikable and such an asshole and that everyone hates him. That is true inclusion, as opposed to saying he's come out and now all of a sudden he's this great guy. It doesn't work like that. True inclusion is bringing the LGBTQ down into the gutter with us.
So true. Some of the best gay representation on television, because it's a show about a bunch of horrible people and they're just like, yeah, the gay people are normal like these people. They're all one.
Yeah.
Okay, so then we have some quotes from him about specifically Mac Finds His Pride, the episode with the dance, which, despite all of what they've just said, is a departure in tone from the show. And so sort of how they decided to do that and why. And so he says, through social media, I had a massive response of our fans in the LGBTQ community that reached out and told me how moved they were and how important it was to them that they felt represented on a show that they loved. And I just was not expecting that. I mean, thousands and thousands and thousands of people. And I just didn't think that we were that kind of show. And it turned out that we were for people. And so we wanted to honor that and do something that, you know, felt very different from what we normally do, that we would create an episode that seems like it's going in one direction and then pull the rug out from underneath. And he's talking again about the overwhelming emotional response from the LGBTQ community. I took it seriously and I felt it would be completely unexpected to have this much more emotionally resonant end to the season. You would expect that Mac would express himself through the art of contemporary dance and it go horribly wrong until you realize that's not the direction we're taking. It is a surprise.
It is. I mean, we've seen scenes before with the gang where they are imagining themselves killing it, and then we flip to reality and they are not killing it.
I mean, part of why he made it a dance piece with a professional dancer is he said if he was trying to do a dance by himself and it wasn't perfectly executed, it would just feel like a joke. Like if his dancing wasn't impressive and he was by himself on stage, that becomes a you're making fun of him moment that they didn't want to have happen.
We also have a quote from Charlie Day,
who co-wrote Mac Finds His Pride.
Yes. And he says, I mean, one of the great things that we get to do is try different things with our episodes. And some of the uncharted waters, if you want to call them that, were genuine emotion. And once we stumbled on the episode becoming more about Frank being more tolerant and accepting something, we thought, well, this is something we haven't really done, which is our characters rarely change or learn. And it was nice to tell a story that way. Maybe it's just because we're getting older and most of the episodes are still pretty typical in the format of just they're there to be funny. But it was nice to try something, for lack of a better term, heartfelt.
It is a whole new thing. Okay, and then we have Glenn Howerton talking about the Mac coming out storyline. He wasn't writing on the show in season 13, so he wasn't responsible for Mac Finds His Pride, but just in general, how they decided to make Mac come out. So he said initially he was against the very conscious idea of having Mac stay openly gay, but finally decided it was time to toy with the idea of things not necessarily evolving, but things changing to a degree. So this was, I believe, still in season 12 after Mac had come out, and they're asking him, like, so is he out? Because clearly he's gone back in the closet before. And Glenn says, he's out. It's definitely a big deal for us. I never thought we would do that. I was against it at first, and the reason I was against it was his character has always been an opportunity to satirize a particular attitude that still sadly exists, that there's something wrong with being gay. And I think that it was important to me, at least, to maintain that level of social satire, which is a big part of the show to me. Taking an attitude, taking a point of view that exists in our society and giving it to one of our characters and sort of blowing it out of proportion. Watching the inevitable outcome of the most extreme version of that point of view. That's always been my MO in terms of the writing of the characters. And to me, there was always such a darkly comical and sad element to having the character continue to deny his own sexuality because of the societal pressures that he put on himself, that he had internalized. So I never wanted him to come out of the closet because I thought that, to me, is showing just how deep that mentality goes. And despite all the evidence and despite all the support of his friends, the man will still continue to deny his sexual orientation. But then I got to a point where I realized I'm holding too hard and fast to that rule. And I think we've made plenty of jokes in that arena. We've satirized that to death. What sort of possibilities does it open up when that character finally does come out of the closet? Which is why we decided to have him come out once and for all. Yeah, you can't mind that forever. Plus, it's just, I don't think he never expected the show to run this long. None of them expected it to run this long, but Glenn
Expects the
himself.
show to run for 16 seasons.
Right, but Glenn in particular has like tried to leave the show multiple times and be like, I'm done with this. I think we've done as much as we could do. And then he just keeps coming back because, you know, it's really fun to make a show with your best friends. And so then I could see him being like, but that's the joke. This is what we're satirizing. And then you get 12 seasons in and you're like, you know what? I'm bored of it. I'm bored of that storyline. Let's do something else. And it's an opportunity to do something that's ultimately hopeful, right? Like even a character like this can eventually find some sort of peace with himself, which is a nice message.
But you also think of literally how much the conversation around gay rights has changed since 2005. Like we are
1000%.
living in a different world than we were when they started the show, even when they were 5 seasons into the show. So there's something sort of reflective about the reality of how much things have changed.
Yeah,
in the
and
last
it's just become
20 years.
so much more normalized now that it starts to become sort of absurd for Mac to not be willing to be out, because the rest of the gang were changing with the times to the point where they were like, it's fine that you're gay. No one cares that you're gay. And it's like to have Mac still holding on to this. Not that that type of person doesn't exist, but
Sure.
to have him be like on that island surrounded by people who are like all the time being like, it's totally fine. It just starts to become a sticking point, I think, as you try to tell that story.
Mm-hmm. So that's Mac's journey. Obviously, again, like they are the creative team, so they sort of have to be on board. They wrote it. They wrote it and acted it and blah, blah, blah. But we also have a little bit from the guys about MacDennis, the actual ship.
MacDennis. Are they on board with MacDennis? I mean, they are also writing that. Like, we'll get to this in when we make our determinations, but I think it's quite clear from everything we've talked about that Mac is canonically in love with Dennis. So the conversation becomes sort of like, what's going to happen with Mac and Dennis? They write towards it all the time, but people are asking them what will be. Are they going to hook up? Like, what's going to happen with these guys? And there is sort of, I don't have actual quotes of this, but there's some interactions with Glenn where people have asked him, like, are they going to get together? And he's like, it's way funnier if they don't get together. So I don't know. People will hold out hope for that. We'll see what that means to them, though, because obviously I don't think they're ever going to, like, confess their feelings in a heartfelt way and then, you know, lovingly walk off into the sunset together. But they've gotten up to the line of them hooking up. So anything could happen, I think, in that respect after Frank versus Russia. But anyway, we have a particular fan who has found all 3 of these guys at various events and asked them, are Mac and Dennis the greatest will they, won't they in sitcom history? So we have all of their answers about that. Rob was asked this and said, Ross and Rachel, Sam and Diane, Mac and Dennis were in the top 3. That's his opinion.
He's giving them the top 3. That's fair. That's fair. That's fair. Glenn says, I'm going to answer yes to that. Because why would I not? I mean, the greatest will they, won't they in television sitcom history? Yes.
And the person asking him says, and you wrote that?
And Glenn said, yeah, damn it.
And then they asked Charlie, who says, yeah, 100%. And they tell him that Rob said that you were among these 3 people, and they list them for him. And he says, nah, Mac and Dennis, because it's a little more unexpected. Ross and Rachel, Sam and Diane, they're right down the middle. So yeah, I think they all are having a lot of fun with the dynamic of Mac and Dennis. They've built something truly strange over the course of these 16 seasons that is just really fun to play with. So I think they're going to keep leaning into it, whether or not that means they will ultimately get together for whatever that means to the show. I mean, Charlie, you never thought would hook up with the waitress, but he did. He and the waitress got together. So
they sure did.
I mean,
do they have any sense of like how long this show is going to actually run, or is it just like indefinitely?
It's indefinite. I mean, FX's position seems to be as long as they want to keep making it, they will let them keep making it. The last couple of times they've picked it up for 2 or 3 seasons at a time because they're just sort of like, whatever you guys want to do. So it's when Rob and Charlie and Glenn get tired of making it is when it will stop, I think. So it could run for any length of time. Who knows?
I only ask because it's not like we have a sense of like, oh, the show will be over at season 20. So, if they're going to do it, it might be at the end of season
In
20.
terms of like a ticking clock on their
Yes.
relationship. Yeah, no, I don't think we have any such thing.
If they're just making the show on and off for the rest of their lives, who knows what's going to
Who knows? They could get together, they could break up, they could get married and adopt a child, and then one of them murders the other one. Anything could happen.
Anything. All of those things could happen, honestly. We don't know. So, it's kind of hard to say what's going to happen over the course of the show because we have no idea how much longer this thing is going to run
and
for.
One thing, like Glenn offhandedly saying it's funnier if they don't get together. 3 years from now, he'll be like, we've run out of ideas. They should get together,
Exactly. It sounds exactly like him being like, oh, we should never change him to be gay. But then it's like, oh, well, it's been running for a long time. Yeah. So maybe when they're all 70-year-old men, they'll be like, wouldn't it be great if they finally got together? 70-year-old men. And you're like, yeah, sure.
They will have not done a season in 20 years and they'll be like, we're coming back for a season of Sunny.
Anything could happen at any time. We just have to hope Danny DeVito is around forever.
Oh, Danny. What would the show be without Danny?
Indeed. Okay. So that's what the creators say, both about Mac's journey and MacDennis. Mm-hmm. But what are the fans up to?
They're writing some stuff. There's not huge, but respectable amount of fic on AO3 for It's Always Sunny. There are about 4,500 total Sunny fics, and 2,300 of them are MacDennis, which is the most popular ship in the fandom.
Indeed. And obviously a very long-running show, but if you remember all the way back to our comedy episode, that's an insane amount of fics for a
comedy.
Sitcom.
Yes.
Yeah.
I guess that's what happens when you have 16 years of content to work with.
To be fair, right? A lot of the sitcoms we covered were 7-8 season sitcoms, and they had 10 fics.
It's true.
Scrubs had 20 fics.
It's true. So whatever they're doing is really engaging with the fans. It's working for them somehow. People have a lot to say. I think it is an interesting situation. In all of our conversations about the comedy, it becomes sort of what are you bringing to the story that you're not getting from the show? Was a lot of the question about how sitcoms worked within fandom. And, first of all, if what you want from the show is a lot of funny jokes, then probably not that many people are going to be able to write fanfic that is satisfying. And then in cases of Scrubs and Psych that we talked about, it feels like you're already getting everything you want from that relationship on screen. So what more is there to do other than have them make out, I guess? Mm-hmm. Whereas I really feel like there's an interesting amount of layering going on with the Sunny characters where there's a lot for people to dig into. There's so much going on with them.
Well, they certainly are psychologically unique characters.
Yeah, there's a lot to do, and there's a lot of interesting... Because Sunny has played with tone enough, I feel like there's sort of a license for fans to take the fic in maybe a more serious direction or something that is sort of a deep character study that the show wouldn't necessarily do, but doesn't feel completely out of character because it's maybe we would have a Sunny episode that is Dennis unpacking his trauma. You never know. It could happen.
You never know. Okay. So we read 2 fics, neither of which were the most kudos. The most kudos one was quite long.
Yes, it was lengthy, and we don't really do that on this podcast. Because hell, guys, we watched 16 seasons of television for this. Did we not do enough?
A lot of work.
So we read the second most popular fic, which is a fic called The Inevitable by Running Wafers. And this was a fic from, I think, 2015. So, pre a lot of MacDennis canon, which is why I suggested that we read this other fic that was written post Frank versus Russia. So it's the most updated version of the MacDennis relationship, just to see what the differences were and how people are conceiving these characters. So tell me a little bit about The Inevitable.
So The Inevitable starts with Matt confessing to Dennis that he is in love with him and that he can't live with him anymore because it's just too much to be in love with Dennis. And,
Yeah, and Dennis is never going to reciprocate.
Not being able to act on it. So he packs some stuff and he leaves and he goes to get drunk with Dee early in the morning. And Dee is like, bro, where are you going to live?
Yeah, you're not living with me.
Yeah. And then, do you want to live with Charlie? And he's like, no. And so luckily, they get so drunk that they do go back to Dee's place and fall asleep. And then Dennis shows up and he's like, Mac, just come back. This is silly. Don't move out. Just come back. We can have sex. And Mac is like, what?
Yeah, what?
And Dennis is like, that's what it takes. Like, that's fine. Like, we could sleep together and it'll be totally chill. And so they do end up going back to their apartment and sleeping together. And they both have a great time. And it's an easy way for them both to get laid regularly. And so Dennis is like, yeah, let's just keep doing this. And so they're having a lot of sex, and to the point of distraction.
Yep.
They're not participating in all of their schemes sufficiently.
They're useless.
Charlie
in the
gets mauled
schemes.
by a dog as a result. Poor Charlie. And he's like, you guys keep sneaking off every 10 minutes to go sleep with each other, and you're not, holding up your part of the being in the gang.
You were supposed to help snatch the dog.
And so they're going along, and sort of as the fic goes on, it becomes more and more clear that they are in a relationship, right? Like, they are exclusively sleeping with each other. They're spending all of their time together. And Mac's still a little hesitant to be like, what is this? Are we exclusive? And then at one point, Dennis does sleep with a woman, and Mac is hurt, and Dennis is legitimately apologetic. And Mac doesn't know how to process that because Dennis is always manipulating people. And Dennis is like, I don't know how to be in a relationship where I don't manipulate people. And you're like, well,
It's
okay,
all he
enough.
knows.
But he is very apologetic, and he's like, I enjoy sleeping with you and I want to be with you. And then eventually they get married as a scam.
Yeah, they're not entirely sure how it's a scam, but it's been suggested to them as a scam, and so they're like, yeah, I guess we'll just go along with that because why wouldn't we?
And so they get married, and they happen to run into Dennis's biological father on the street. And they're like, Dennis is like, this is my partner. And his dad is like, how is this a scam? Because they're always scamming his dad. And it's unclear as it's scam. But then as a fun little coda to the story, it turns out that Dennis has been committing a crime and Matt can't testify against him because of spousal privileges. And that was the scam.
That was the scam all along.
Yeah.
It's kind of an interesting one because it's from Mac's perspective for the most part, and then Dennis is sort of just going along with everything throughout the episode. Like anything that happens, Dennis is just like, yeah, okay, why not? Which is kind of an interesting Dennis vibe. I think that's product of the time. We've been through a lot of seasons post that when Dennis doesn't feel so much like he would just go along if something like this happened. So it is interesting that their premise from 2015 is, well, if Mac just said something, then Dennis would be like, well, sure, I'll sleep with you. I don't care. Whatever it takes to keep you in my life. It's a nice idea.
It is a nice idea.
So then we read a fic called I Want to Know, Am I Sure That I Heard You Right? By Lohoron. Certainly not pronouncing that correctly. Takes place after Frank versus Russia. So all of that stuff, the conversation with Johnny has not been unpacked. And Dennis is distracted one morning when Mac is on his way out to the gym, and he accidentally says, love you, offhandedly, as Mac is going to leave. And it sort of blows up his whole life because Mac is not willing to let Dennis pretend that he didn't say it. And Mac confronts him about, why would you say that? Did you mean it? What's the deal? And Dennis doesn't want to answer any of those questions. And then Mac brings up Johnny. What's the deal with that? Because he's like, you know what? Remember how you said you were Johnny? Well, Johnny said he loved me. And then it becomes this thing of like all of the conversations that they had while Dennis was pretending to be Johnny. And that's an even more incriminating conversation to have than the love you conversation. So they get to a point where Dennis is like, can't handle being confronted by this now seemingly confident Mac who has, like evidence against him. And Mac is like, all right, I'm going to go to the gym. Don't worry about it. And so he leaves Dennis to just like think about everything for the hour when he's gone at the gym. And he's like, I don't know how I'm going to handle this. He's reliving their entire life. He doesn't think he can have feelings because his whole thing is not having feelings. Then he's like, how do I feel about Mac? Why have I kept him in my life this long? What does it all mean? Why did I say love you? I don't know. It's like he's spiraling through everything that's ever happened to them. And why did I act that way as Johnny? Was it just giving me an excuse to do what I actually wanted to do? And so then Mac comes back and he's brought dinner and he convinces Dennis to eat his dinner because Dennis never wants to eat anything. He's a disordered eater. And Mac's acting just sort of normal. And then Dennis has to confront the idea that it seems like he at least has some kind of feelings for Mac because he asks Mac, how do you know you're in love? This is a question he's never encountered before. And Mac seriously answers for him all the moments in his life with Dennis that made him realize that he was in love with him. And Dennis is like, oh shit, I guess maybe I also have feelings for you. this is a thing that's new to me 30 years into our relationship. And so he sort of is like, okay, like Mac is willing to settle for Dennis just admitting that he is Johnny, like the Johnny stuff were
Yeah.
his actual thoughts. And Dennis is able to be like, yeah, okay, I'll admit to that. And then the two of them just sort of cuddle on the couch and they're gonna, I guess, move forward somehow. I don't know what will happen with that, but it is enough of a victory for Mac to just get Dennis to be like, I do have some sort of
Love
feelings
you.
for you. Yeah, we will sort out what this means.
Because Johnny had also told him in text that he loved
Yeah,
him.
when he was drunk texting him one night, he had said
Yeah.
that he loved him. So that's a thing he needed to confront. And so it's kind of an interesting exploration of, I think, how much more difficult it would be to try to drag Dennis into some sort of feelings realization when Dennis has struggled with feelings for his whole life. So just the Dennis headspace of like, what's it like up there, Dennis?
He's a fascinating character, and Glenn's performance is also layered and always interesting.
Always interesting. So anyway, the reason I wanted to do that one was to just see sort of a transition from how people are thinking about their relationship over the course of the show as things change and the show does insane shit like Dennis catfishing Mac.
Indeed.
How is it going to affect them?
All right. So yes, this ended up being quite a lengthy episode, but it's fine. You guys only hear from us every 2 months, so hopefully it's okay.
And hopefully people like this show. Because if not, you're going to be like, what the hell are you guys talking about?
All right. So I think, though, we are at our questions.
Mm-hmm. Is it queer baiting, queer coding, or queer canon?
I guess it was queer coding to queer canon, at least with Mac's character.
Yep.
MacDennis?
I mean, it's queer canon that Mac is in love with him.
That's true.
I think Dennis is queer coded.
Okay.
So we'll see.
I guess, do you personally feel baited at this time?
Oh, no. I don't think there's any baiting going on with this show. I mean, the character that has been gay all along is openly gay. The character that he lives with, he's in love with, and that's quite clear. That's not queer baiting. And then whether or not the two of them will get together, that's just, that's comedy, baby. Whatever's funniest is what's going to happen.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. If you gender swap the characters, would they be a couple?
Well, no, because Mac is gay.
That's true. Also, no one's a couple. None of these people have long-term relationships.
Absolutely not. That is anathema to them.
The closest is Charlie being obsessed with the waitress, but as soon as he gets together with the waitress, he realizes he hates her. Annoying.
Yep.
D is like, she's been a bitch the whole time.
That's such a great encapsulation of how it is to write a sitcom like this, especially one that goes on forever. You can see how for 10 years or whatever, they're like, obviously the funniest thing is if Charlie never gets together with the waitress, because that's fucking hilarious that they would never get together. And then it goes on long enough that you're like, but maybe the funniest thing is they do get together and he realizes she sucks.
Yeah.
And it was very funny.
It was.
So that's the thing.
And she does suck.
She really sucks. She's a horrible person. She's just as bad as the gang. Most of the show is populated by other people who are like perfectly fine, normal people whose lives are negatively impacted by the show. But then there are some recurring characters who are just as bad as the gang. And those are some fun characters.
We haven't talked about the McPoyles at all.
I'm obsessed with the McPoyles. They're so good. You and I both already adore Jimmy Simpson.
Yes.
But the McPoyles are this family of incestuous milk drinkers. Every time they're around, they're just so weird.
They are. The Ponderosas all have problems.
The Ponderosas are troubled. Both of Mac and Charlie's mothers are hilarious in their own way and very strange. And then Charlie's Uncle Jack is clearly a child molester. So he's
very preoccupied with how small his hands are.
Those are his two main qualities.
The small hands is one of the funniest things I've ever seen.
Well, because he wears bigger hands on his hands in the courtroom.
And he's obsessed with the other lawyer's hands.
They're huge.
Did you see that guy's hands? Oh my God. And then, of course, we've mentioned Cricket, whose life is negatively impacted. Although by the end, he seems like that's the life he wants to be living.
He's fine with it now. I mean, he was a priest who was in love with Dee when they were younger. And then in the first episode he comes in the show, Dee decides it would be hilarious because she realizes he was in love with her to tell him that she's in love with him too. And then he quits the priesthood And she's like, oh, I don't actually want to be with you. And then from
And it's
there,
all
his
downhill
life just
from there.
becomes unimaginably horrible.
Yeah. Oh, Cricket.
Oh, Cricket. I love him. That's David
Great.
Hornsby, who is one of the writers on this show as well. So all of their long-running character people are people that they were just friends with. Anyway, all the recurring characters, excellent. The writing on the show, fantastic. Love it. Love these guys. And what a weird, interesting ride Mac and Dennis have been. I'm excited to see more.
Mm-hmm. All right. So we said no queer baiting. We don't have to rate it. What's canon is canon.
Mm-hmm.
Good times.
Good times. Anything else? We've said plenty. No?
I mean, I could talk about the show forever, but
I mean, if we just got into like episodes, it would be unrelated to this.
it wouldn't entirely be about Mac and Dennis. It would just be me being like all the things I've enjoyed about it as I've been watching.
Yeah. I mean, I feel bad because it's a fascinating story, Mac and Dennis, and Max coming out is really cool, but I just feel like we've given everybody else short shrift. I want to talk about how great Charlie is and Dee. It was like, that's a story for another podcast.
We never even mentioned that Dee looks like a bird.
She's a bird. We didn't even mention that the running joke of the show is how much they all hate Dee. Poor Dee. But she's horrible too, so it is what it is.
She is. She's as horrible as Dennis, really.
Yeah, they're twins. They're equally horrible.
They are. She's the only one who truly understands the implication.
They have the same ideas about the implication.
This is the implication.
They're such horrible people. It's unbelievable.
You're not getting it. You're not getting. No, I'm not. I'm not getting it.
I'm not. It sounds like you're going to hurt these women. I'm not going to hurt these women.
Ma'am, you would never be invited, so you don't have to worry about getting hurt. So you are going to hurt.
Oh, it's so goddamn funny.
Because of the implication.
Yeah, we could talk for hours about just how funny the show is, but that would be for a different podcast.
It would. It would.
So, what are we talking about next time?
Something with much less content, which is probably, I haven't watched it yet, but I'm going to go out on a limb and say not as funny.
That's my guess as well. I also haven't seen it, but if this show approached the levels of humor of Sunny, I would be very surprised.
We'll be watching Masters of Air, another...
Masters of the Air.
Sorry. Another little quickie after all this work. We're going to take a slight break from watching much content to watch.
This is a fan suggestion.
Listener suggestion.
So, excellent.
Mm-hmm.
In the meantime, if you have comments, questions, or concerns, you can reach us at ltbkpod@gmail.com. We are on Tumblr at ltbkpod, and we have a Discord that you can find the link to on the Tumblr. If you're enjoying the podcast, tell a friend, leave us a review, and subscribe. The next episode of Let the Boys Kiss will be out in January of 2025.